A little girl from Bethesda, Maryland, who loved exotic creatures, discovered that getting close to them in the wild often requires going out on a limb. Today, Nalini Nadkarni is one of the world's leading experts on tree canopies and a fascinating woman. With support from the National Geographic Society, she spends much of her time climbing to the tops of rainforest in Costa Rica and the Pacific Northwest. And what she finds there is simply astonishing.
Earlier today, we had a down-to-earth talk with Nalini Nadkarni.
I feel that trees are one of the few absolutely good things in the world. I've never met a bad tree.
A lot of people would look up into the tops of trees and see nothing but leaves and twigs. What do you see there?
Well, I see the leaves and the twigs, but I also see a whole world of organisms that are never found on the forest floor, ranging from microbes to monkeys. The things that I began studying as a graduate student when I first got access to the canopy involved understanding how are the mosses and the lichens and the vascular plants that live up there and create actually an arboreal soil in the canopy. How does that affect the trees? How does it affect the forest as a whole? Where do these plants get their nutrients?
What do you mean an arboreal soil?
An arboreal soil is kind of a, it seems like a contradiction in terms, but in fact, when you climb up into the canopy and you start looking at these plants, if you start pulling them off, you realize that there's this thick layer of soil. It's a true soil. It's never been technically described as a soil, but it's formed by the mosses and the lichens and the plants that grow up there, getting their nutrients from rain and fog, living up there. And when they die in place. They start decomposing, and just like a bog situation in Scotland or England or Minnesota, basically a very acidic soil forms. There are insects, there are slugs, there are even earthworms crawling around in the forest canopy.
This sounds like an entirely new area of endeavor in that I've never heard of anybody doing this.
Well, it's a very, very new field of science. It's been termed the last biotic frontier on Earth. And really, we've only been able to investigate it in the last 20 years or so. Some people started applying mountain climbing techniques to get up into these tall trees. So we shoot lines into trees over branches. We put on harnesses and use Jumar ascenders to get up into the canopy, just like mountain climbers get up rock faces. We've also started using hot air balloons and construction cranes and catwalks. So now the world of the canopy is much more accessible than it ever has been, since sort of the unfortunate loss of our prehensile tails many millions of years ago.
Oh, we'll discuss the loss of tails later.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was so unfortunate.
Well, when I sit up in the canopy and I look at these monkeys just brachiating across, I'm just filled with envy because I'm sort of stuck in my harness and so forth.
It still must be very hard to get around up there.
It is. And part of it is the danger that we always stay locked into our harnesses. We move very carefully from one branch to another. Another thing is that we recognize the fragility of the forest canopy organisms. We want to be very careful to disturb the plants and the animals up there as little as possible because some of their recovery time can be very, very long, and we've learned that as we've worked in the canopy. So if you accidentally kick off a bromeliad or a patch of moss, we know that it can take over a decade for that patch to be recolonized. Biologists have figured out that over 50% of the biodiversity of many tropical forests resides in the canopy, these plants and animals that you never see if you stay stuck on the dark, dank forest floor. If you want to know where pollination is taking place, where fruit dispersal takes place, all processes that are essential for the maintenance and the reproduction of the forest as a whole, where are you going to find it? It ain't on the forest floor, it's up in the canopy. So for all those reasons, we go to the canopy.
Do you ever find yourself saying, I went from being a little girl who liked climbing trees to making it my life, and just thinking, this is amazing?
Every day that I walk out into the forest and put on my harness and climb into a tree, I think exactly that thought. Wow! Wow! I can see forever! And I hope that is a lesson for especially other little girls, that they too can pursue their passions, whether it's forest canopies or the bottom of the ocean or the middle of the desert or whatever it is, that with a strong dream and a sense of purpose and a lot of support from people like the people at the Geographic, it can really come true.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Nalini Nadkarni, and good luck.